you're wondering, well, where does the produce safety rule come in? Well, isn't that a federal law? Yes, it is. And it was based on gaps. So I'm going to segue into how I like to guide people into this whole getting in their head around produce safety. But Food Safety Modernization Act, produce safety rule is based on gaps. And now this is mandated depending on your income of produce sales. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. So just to reiterate, we have good agricultural practices, voluntary, nationwide. In Maryland, we have it's governed by MDA. In the rest of the world, if your state Department of Agriculture doesn't handle it, you can talk to USDA, all right, and directly get GAP certified. And then the produce safety rule comes off of that. So just to reiterate, GAP is voluntary annual certification. It does require a day of training, and it's something that I get to do. I love it. All right. You have to write a farm food safety plan. You need to implement reduced risk practices. And then you're going to invite, in Maryland, MDA in to audit your safety plan and your implementation, USDA in the rest of the states. And again, voluntary, but may be required by wholesalers, some restaurants, hospitals, schools. It depends on what your buyer wants, okay? Now, if you meet the basic monetary cutoff of produce sales, now you fall under the produce safety rule. This is now mandatory. It is a federal law. It requires another day of training. Sorry, guys. That's 2 days of training. I'm sorry. All right. Implementation of the practices. And then again, in Maryland, we're so lucky. Our MDA folks will come and inspect. In the rest of the world, FDA comes in and inspect, and it's done on about a 2 to 3 year cycle. Okay. And again, based on annual sales of produce. And I hope I haven't confused you. Please, you can put questions in the chat, and we will answer them as needed or after. Okay. So hopefully we've gotten those two things straight, because let me tell you, operators always confuse GAP with produce safety rule with GAP. One's federal and mandatory, one is optimum and voluntary. Okay, it's just a good thing to do. All right, so I like to tell my operators, conventional farmers, microgreens, doesn't matter. Start with good agricultural practices training, because this is going to teach you all the basic protocols and where your weak points might be. You know, you're doing a risk assessment, right? I'm moving my supervisor. All right, so let me ask you some questions. Do you employ workers? Now, this can be Aunt Mildred. It can be volunteers. It can be your sister. It can be your parents. All right. Do you use water? Yeah, I know you do. Do you see pests? And here in controlled environment ag, we're talking about mice, cockroaches. You know, do you see them? Okay, we got to control them. Do you wash your produce before selling? We can talk for days on that. Do you use tools, bins, baskets, sorting tables, better known as food contact surfaces? All right. So what we're going to do in good agricultural practices is we're going to learn how to assess the risks associated with those practices that I just listed. Okay. And then you're going to learn how to minimize the risks and hopefully control cross-contamination. So do you employ workers? So you're going to learn about worker training. And let me tell you, teaching Aunt Mildred how to follow your operations practices. I love family-owned businesses. And oh my gosh, I have a lot of my farmers that are centennial farms, and they're in their third and fourth generation. Oh, the family dynamics. It's so much fun. Okay, worker training. That goes for volunteers too. So if you use water, and I know you guys do, you want to learn about water testing and safe distribution of that water, okay? You're going to learn how to manage and avoid contamination associated with those little critters, like those little Disney mice, all right? Not in your grow area. You're going to learn about the risks associated with washing produce, and I'll say right now that there is no rule and there is no law that states you must wash your produce before it goes to market. Just getting it out there, okay? You're going to learn proper cleaning and sanitizing of food contact surfaces, and I can tell you right now, you're probably not doing it right. I'm sorry. When we look at both good agricultural practices and produce safety rule, when we as officials, all right, look and we work with producers, we have two main issues in all of these different things. One is worker training. It's difficult, people, we understand. But the other thing is very few operations clean and sanitize their food contact surfaces effectively. And if you're going to do it, don't waste your time and money, do it effectively. All right, so I do a lot of training on cleaning and sanitizing food contact surfaces. Okay, so to reiterate, we're going to learn how to assess the risks associated with your practice. This is something that you're going to do internally. You're going to look at, how do I do these things? And after GAP training, you're going to say, whoa, maybe I shouldn't be doing it that way, or maybe I can do it better. All right. You're going to learn how to minimize the risk, control contamination, and then if you get your certification, it can open up